Good evening, all, and welcome back to our second episode of the 2022 season of the Backroad in Between Media's Fantasy NASCAR Auto Racing Show. I'm back again as your host, Elliot Hicks. With me again this week, Seth Woolcock and Rod Villagomez. How's it going, gentlemen?
I'm here, man. I'm here. I'm ready to go. Racing is back. Honestly, I don't think we could have asked for a better first 2 weeks of racing. Pumped to be back here with you boys.
I was letting the boss talk first. So, yeah, man, I'm excited to be back. I, too, have enjoyed a couple of good weeks of racing and really exceeded my expectations. So I'm looking forward to another really good one coming up here in Las Vegas.
All right, well, why hesitate? Let's go right into our first segment of the week, In the Rear View. There's our nice little video intro. Shout out again to Michael Third and Short for putting this together for us. So in the rear view, we're 2 races into the season. The Daytona 500, won by Austin Cindric, the rookie in the number 2 car, and then Auto Club Fontana, California Speedway. Kyle Larson won, but it was basically anything but the favorite that was contending in that race. As we were alluding to, it was one hell of a first couple of races. Rod, we'll start with you. What'd you think of the Daytona 500 and the race at Auto Club?
The Daytona 500 I loved because it did not string out in a single file line very often. You know, seen that the last couple of years where it does get single file, and at Daytona that's not thrilling. That's not fun racing. So, you know, have them being side by side as often as they were, a lot of contention. I loved it. I love the fact that these cars seem like one, they could take some damage and keep going, and two, that there was no real clear favorite in the drive. I mean, anybody seemed like they could have won the Daytona 500 that year or this year. So I loved that aspect of it. And then when you moved it on to Fontana, obviously not the super speedway, but not a mile-and-a-half track, we finally got to see pit crews. We finally got to see that come into play. And once again, we were talking about cars that we don't normally talk about in the course.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about cars in the 40s, and that hardly ever happens anymore. So I love the fact that it's given us an opportunity to see some drivers that we don't normally talk about have a good run, or at least look like they're in contention to win the race. You know, I was looking back and I love the pit times, right? 9-second pit times. What the hell is that all about? You know, it makes the race a lot more fun, in my opinion, now that we're seeing so many new things, not just the car, but the way the car makes everything else that's involved that much more exciting.
Yeah, and I think from a fantasy point of view too, it kind of went, maybe not exactly what we predicted, but I think we got what we were hoping for out of Daytona. Some of the favorites, they went out early due to some wrecks. The big one came eventually at the end of it. You had guys like Bubba Wallace, Austin Cindric, these younger drivers scrapping for a win. So I think from a fantasy, standpoint, you got what you predicted there. If you played DFS that week, you probably shot yourself in the foot by playing someone like Denny Hamlin, who went out pretty early in that one. But as far as Auto Club, I mean, I thought Auto Club from a fantasy standpoint, it was frustrating at times if you had a guy like Tyler Reddick who you thought was going to be the guy to bring home that pay dirt for you in your DFS lineup. Or, even on the other end of it too, like Kyle Busch, the whole race, down laps, struggles to finally get back on the lead lap. And then he finally gets back on the lead lap, bolts from low or high 20s all the way up into the teens. So overall, I think it was a pretty awesome race, pretty awesome few races for fantasy as well.
Yeah, the crazy thing is both of these races in terms of finishing order and winners basically ended up how we expected, even though the racing was almost anything but. I mean, I feel like we knew that Austin Cindric was going to win a race this year. We thought we really wouldn't be thinking about him until COTA, the first road course that comes up. He's already locked himself into the playoffs with the Daytona 500 win, a guy who just a few years ago we were looking at as potentially a bust, or a guy who was only around because of his dad being involved with Penske. It was good to see him win. And it was great to not see everybody out in a single file line. A lot of people thought this might be like the 2013 Daytona 500. Wasn't very interesting. Everyone was all strung out of line because that was the last time they made a jump to a new car. So it was good that we saw some exciting racing. And same thing with Auto Club too. You know, even though Larson ended up winning, Tyler Reddick, perhaps the most snake bit guy in NASCAR right now, led a lot. We saw Eric Jones in a 43 car that hasn't run well in years and years come perhaps the closest that car's come to a win in a while, short of maybe Bubba Wallace in that Daytona race or whatever. And the new car, I think the new car has held up fairly well. I think that an interesting thing is cars can break again. You know, we were for the past couple of years there, we'd kind of perfected that Gen 6 car. You never really saw mechanical failures, anything like that. There were multiple times where cars just kind of broke. And that's not a great thing if you're the driver or the team whose car breaks. But
or
these
the
things,
fantasy manager trying to set some lineups as well.
yeah. But these things are so hard to drive now. They've got that element where you can just break apart and kind of go loose all at once. That may have been part of what happened to Reddick. That's what happened to my particular guy, Alex Bowman, before he went into the wall. So you're right, a little disappointing, but hard to drive is good. That's what all the drivers wanted. I think Eric Jones made comments to that delight that he loves the fact they're hard to drive.
Keselowski asked for it too. That was the thing. He was like, I want that. And so guess what? He was one of the cars that had trouble last week too.
Yeah, if these guys want to prove themselves at the top of the world,
don't get me started on Brad Keselowski right now. This guy is just taking out every one of my fantasy drivers. You know, I probably had 8 lineups last week, and it seemed like every single lineup, this guy is just Bubba Wallace finally gets up into the top 10 in the day. Nope, not with Brad Keselowski if he has anything to say about it, man. Brad needs to get it under control here, boys.
You know, when you're the guy who wrecks Ricky Stenhouse at a plate track, you're the one who might be just a little over the line there.
Yeah.
That was a little nuts to see that 6 car just bulldozing his way up. But he did almost win the 500, so I can't be mad. I had 2 more points here before we move on. I like the fact the cars break. I like the fact that they're hard to drive. There seems to be a big issue, though, with these cars on flat tires. And you may be asking, well, you're not really supposed to drive cars on flat tires. What's the problem? There have been multiple times in these first couple of races where cars have just kind of spun out. All 4 tires go flat, and they just can't move. There's a new rule in place now where they literally will have to they will pick your car up and tow it in to your pit stall so you can keep racing. But either way, a guy just spins out. If you spin hard enough, normally you could just keep driving, go into the pits, change tires, wouldn't even lose a lap. Now you're down at least 2 laps. And in some cases in the Daytona 500, this is what happened to Alex Bowman as well. Just spun out, didn't really get a whole lot of damage from the big one. The car just couldn't move for 4 laps because it was on 4 flat tires. He went 4 laps down and was never a factor in that race again. And I forget who it was. I think Keselowski spun. Maybe Chastain did the same thing. You just couldn't drive it, and that was a little frustrating. So that's one thing to need to figure out.
Elliot, I agree with you on that, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit later on the DFS segment. But that really makes some of these like differential point targets like really that much more important because I mean, guys like Chris Bell last week, he had that same issue. I think he might have ended up going to the garage because of it. And then Kyle Busch, like we said, he was same thing happened to him. So that has been probably the most frustrating thing so far. I like that call, Elliot.
And with the auto club races too, these intermediate tracks, back when we had the old 550 horsepower package with the older car, they were some of the biggest snooze fests that we had. But so Jeff Gluck of The Athletic, one of the NASCAR beat reporters, he does was it a good race poll and puts up, was X track a good race? This past Fontana race got the highest rating ever for a race there. He's been doing this for maybe 6 years, so not terribly long. And it was the 3rd best intermediate sort of track ever in that poll. It was only behind the 2nd Darlington race right after we came back from the pandemic, where you saw Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott. And then the top one on that list was Chicago in 2018, the infamous slide job with Larson and Kyle Busch as well. So if that Auto Club race shows just how good this kind of racing can be with the next gen, man, I'm so excited for it. It's going to be spectacular.
Yeah, I can't wait. NASCAR just needs better roadside service. That's all.
Don't use AAA. Don't use AAA, man. They're god awful out here in the East, man.
The Auto Club should have picked them up. But Elliot, I want to piggyback on that because that is frustrating too. You can't, that just not only does it stop the momentum of the race, but it also, again, puts drivers at a disadvantage where they weren't there before. And that almost doesn't seem fair in a way that you're going to put a guy 3-4 laps down. A la Kyle Busch, right? That car happened and he couldn't get out. So now he's down Now you're sitting on the pits and you're just watching as everybody kind of goes by. These caution laps tick off as you're trying to get hitched up. So, yeah, I mean, they really do got to do something about that. I know they can't put interliners in every tire on every track, but they got to fix that. I mean, and they're going to take notes, obviously, but I think that should be one of the major things on their lists for this next coming set of races.
Please.
Yeah, and we've already seen some. Sorry, Seth, you got a point there?
No, I was just saying, please, I need that, man. I've got a couple lineups even in our redraft league, man. Just absolutely, bit the dust this week just because of that. I had Kyle Busch and Chris Bell, so I felt that pain, man.
Oh yeah, and the wheels could be a big issue down the road too. We've already seen some problems where I think it was RFK and Penske were making modifications to the wheels because they didn't think that they were safe enough. We've seen wheels coming off. It's going to be something to talk about, but regardless of whether the wheels come off or not, we've got fantasy stuff to do here, and we'll move on to our next segment, the tire tiers, where we rank the drivers for you in terms of who you should pick up. So we had all the four of us, including Jared Bakaisa, who unfortunately not with us again this evening. We'll hope to get him on next episode. All the four of us ranked all the drivers from the first two races of the year in 5 tiers of 6. And here's what we've got. Tier number 1, as you can see, Kyle Larson, Joey Logano, Chase Elliott, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., and Tyler Reddick jumping into tier 1. How wild is it that we have a Richard Childress Racing driver jumping into tier 1? Pretty nuts. But I made the point last week, RCR was the first team to start messing with these next-gen cars. That's not to say Reddick and Austin Dillon are not very talented drivers, but it is not surprising at all to see them performing so well to start off the year. Seth, give me some thoughts on Tier 1, guys.
I don't want a victory lap. We can't victory lap this early in the season, but I think as a team we did pretty well ranking last week. I know most of these guys were in our top tier last 2 weeks when we did our show. So, hats off to that. I think we called it, a lot of these guys being good. We were really high on Joey Logano compared to consensus, I thought, and Kyle Busch as well. So I think that's great. As far as tier 1, I think there's one big name we're missing here, and it's Ryan Blaney. I don't know who was in our rankings that ranked him so low. I'm going to guess Jared or Rod.
I was going to say, Rod, you can elaborate on that a bit. I thought that Blaney was very, very low in your ranks, but Seth, you go ahead and continue first.
That's my biggest discrepancy. I don't know if I can completely take Hamlin out of this tier 2. I think I had him maybe 6 overall for me. I'm just not there with Reddick yet. I need to see him finish it. He's never won a race. I can't put him in my top 6 drivers. I think that's a little spicy of a take there. Rod, I think you would disagree with me, though.
Well, okay, look, for me, this top tier right here, obviously the Hendricks cars are dominant, and you can't even argue with that, right? I mean, Larson's obviously on top, Elliott, and now for me, I actually had all 4 of them in the top tier. So because to me, I watch these guys and I watch them run up front. Obviously, circumstances for Chase Elliott were different last week. He brushed up against the wall, but you saw their dominance through most of the race. Most of them were all in the top 10. All 4 of them at some point were in the top 10 at one point or another. And they're all dominant cars. So that's why I would have them all in there. But for Blaney, I don't know. Like I've seen what he can do. Yes, obviously he was 4th at Daytona, but then he came 18th in Fontana last week. I'm not wowed by him. He's not one of those guys where every week he wows me, and that's kind of where my tiers come from a little bit, is that wow factor. And you even though you look and he hovers around good finishes all the time, I don't know. I guess I haven't seen enough of them. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, that tier works well. I think the only discrepancy I had was that I had all 4 Hendrick drivers in that top tier.
I think all 4 Hendrick in the top tier is probably a hot take, and that's coming from a guy who's pulled for Hendrick Motorsports drivers for more than 10 years. But so Reddick, I can kind of defend that as well, him not quite being tier 1, because both Reddick and Hamlin were tied up in terms of our total rankings. What I did in that situation was just took the average of where we all had him. Reddick eked out Denny Hamlin, so Hamlin got bumped to tier number 2, which is the 11 car Denny Hamlin, William Byron's 24, Ryan Blaney, Austin Cindric, Kevin Harvick, and Alex Bowman in tier number 2. Rod, any thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I had Stenhouse in that tier 2.
Wow.
All the way
Wow.
down. But Stenhouse, I mean, again, that's one of those guys. He finished 10th, right?
Yeah, he did look strong. He did look strong on Sunday. I'll give you that, Rod.
I'm telling you, we were talking about cars in the 40s. That's what I'm talking about. Like he had a good run at the Daytona 500 for a while until he got wrecked. So he looks like he may have this car dialed in. He was making some pretty good moves on that track and hanging tough last week in Fontana. He showed me something. And I feel like these last 2 weeks, he showed me that he can drive this car. So really, that's the only discrepancy I had. But everybody else, Cindric, a little high for my taste. Well, look, I love Cindric. I do. He won the Daytona 500, yes. But that's the Daytona 500, right? He came back and had trouble on Fontana. Obviously, it was a little out of his control. But he still put himself in positions where he got into that trouble. So I want to see some more before I throw him in the top 2 tiers.
See, I'm the complete opposite on Cindric. My point here for this tier is I think that this 2 car is going to be a championship contender this year.
Ooh.
He's going to end up making the Final Four or anything like that. Probably not. But we've seen competitive runs from him, winning the 500, staying up front nearly the whole time. Won the pole for this race in Fontana, and he's still got all those road courses where he's right up there with Chase Elliott in terms of being just absolutely dominant. Remember, I believe it was Coda last year in a car, the number 33 car for Penske that wasn't even running full time. He was out there in the rain on slick tires, leading the race by quite a few seconds from guys who were all on rain tires at that point. So if he can do that in a car that's not even running full time, I think that Cindric is going to have a big year and show something in this 2 car that we didn't see from Keselowski, at least last year. I know Keselowski's been a title contender in that 2 for quite a bit, but this just shows that it's really not going to miss a step with Cindric in there.
Elliot, I can't agree more. And like, I just really think I'm in on the whole team Penske right now. These 3 drivers are looking really good. Well, we already talked about Blaney a little bit. I think Blaney has a speed. He's top 4 in the standings, so I like what I've been seeing out of him. You know, I guess, Rod, maybe this comes down to more of the whole, you know, what we talk about in fantasy football a lot, analytics versus film. Yeah, Blaney hasn't been, you know, overly impressive on film, but the analytics, he gets it done. I'm liking what I'm seeing on the stat sheet. I really think like Austin Cindric, kind of like you said, I don't know if I would call him a championship contender yet, Elliot, but he's a guy, I think he belongs in this tier 2. And, you know, outside of Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney in this tier, I think he's as good as any of them. You know, he really showed a lot to be able to stay out in front at the Daytona 500 as much as he did. And he was running top 10, you know, a good bit at Fontana too. Like he wasn't a slouch. I remember a couple times just like being like, damn, I wish I drafted him in our redraft. So, yeah, man, I think Austin Cindric and Blaney here are the 2 I really want. What about Hamlin, though, guys? Is Hamlin the biggest bust so far right now? He's in position 30 overall in the standings, not fantasy points, but in NASCAR standings.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have some bad luck in the Daytona 500. And he's had more than his share of good luck there. I think he's got 3 Daytona 500. Yeah. But, yeah, I mean, it's only been 2 races, but this is a bad trend. And remember, the entire regular season last year, he didn't win. He won 3 times in the playoffs, didn't win a regular season race last year. Could this be the start of a true downward spiral for that 11?
Well, he's probably got 1 foot into ownership at this point. I mean, you got to think that.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point.
I thought about that.
His priorities are split right now.
And that could be really interesting, actually, because it's not that he's not going to be competitive. If it's a situation where his performance starts to dip, Joe Gibbs Racing is not short of guys, not short of prospects in Xfinity and the Truck Series. Now we've even got Joe Gibbs' grandson, who's
Hi, baby.
in the Xfinity Series. I wonder almost, I mean, this is an entire conversation for another day, but could Hamlin just dip over to a third 23-11 team, keep the Gibbs support, put somebody else in that 11? Could be.
I literally thought about this last week, Ellie. I don't know if I was just watching the race and zoning out for a minute, but I literally had this exact thought. So I think maybe that's better for, you know, if we ever do a NASCAR conspiracy podcast, but right. I like it. I like the take. I don't think you're outlandish on that.
Could be interesting to watch. And that, if it happens, will certainly have fantasy implications. For now, we'll stick to our tiers here. And tier number 3, where we have Brad Keselowski, Eric Almirola, Christopher Bell, Kurt Busch, Austin Dillon, and Chris Buescher. I'll start off with this one. by eating a little bit of crow. I could not have been more wrong over these first two races about RFK, Roush Fenwick Keselowski Racing. I thought these guys are not going to perform that well. We haven't seen competitiveness from Roush in a long, long time. They swept the dual races. They both ran well in the 500, and they both ran pretty well at Auto Club. Again, I don't think they're going to be quite on the same level as your top-tier teams, but if these first 2 weeks have shown anything, they are well on their way there. What do you think, Rod?
So my only concern is that Keselowski is overrunning his own self. I mean, again, it was a disappointing finish last week, 27th finish at Auto Club, and you just saw it sort of play out the way it played out in Daytona. He's literally pushing the issue to the point where I almost feel like he's doing himself a disservice. So that's why I didn't have him in this tier at all. I did have him a tier down because, again, I'm watching film. You know what I'm saying? Like we're talking analytics versus film. And to me, I'm watching a driver that is pushing the issue far too hard. I feel like if he would have been able to lay back a little bit and just let things happen around him, he has the speed. He's got the skill, obviously. There's no doubt about that. But he's pushing the issue. And that scares me off of him in anything higher than until he levels it out. I want to see him level out his mood. I want to see him level out his driving before I start to put him any higher than where I put him earlier.
Rod, I think you're dead on that, man. Honestly, like I did have him in my tier 3, but it is a risk versus reward type thing. We could see Keselowski come out. He's been really good at some of these upcoming tracks, so he's an interesting play. But it's like I don't want him in a DFS lineup right now. Like I'm staying away. He's too wily. Like we did see him. Like keep in mind, like realistically, Harrison Burton wrecked because of Brad Keselowski in the 500. He flipped. Like Brad was pushing the issue a little too much for a rookie, I think. And then he really did cause that crash kind of later in the race here at Auto Club too. So I think he has speed. I think it's a risk versus reward type situation though. You have to be willing to risk it with him.
Yeah, definitely still risky, but again, from the performances I've seen from those guys, I think I will take the risk, if I were to put out DFS.
You're a gambler. Elliot's a gambler, man. You need that gambler's high, baby.
Let it roll.
One thing I want to say about this tier, and I'll yellow crow here, is I was once again low this season coming in on Aric Almirola. I was absolutely dogging him. I think I had in my mid-20s for my ranks. Right now, there's one driver in all of NASCAR that's been top 10 in both these two races, and it's Aric Almirola, baby. So maybe this is that fairy tale season where he, really puts up. So I think right now, he's been a smash value in DFS too because he started from the rear a couple times too. So I want Aric Almirola really everywhere I can get him right now.
It's funny because I actually had him as a top 10 finisher in an article in a bet too. So, I saw the same sort of thing you did where he's sneaky. He's good this year. Mm-hmm. He's good this season. And he was running well in Fontana anyways before that. So, he was destined for a top 10 finish there and he fulfilled it.
Yeah, I have more to say on Stewart-Haas Racing, but I will save it as we've still got another driver there to talk about. We'll move on to tier number 4 now. Daniel Suarez, Eric Jones, Chase Briscoe, Bubba Wallace, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and Ross Chastain. Rod, I know you were talking up Stenhouse a little bit ago. What are your thoughts on these guys?
It's funny again because Stenhouse still Wreckhouse, what the wreck guy? That's Jimmy
Wreckhouse, yeah,
exactly. But he's actually, again, this is one of those situations where as you're watching the race, you hear, oh, and there's Ricky Stenhouse inside the top 10, and there's Ricky Stenhouse fighting for the lead. Like you're scratching your head, going, who and where and when did he start to do that kind of stuff? And so, I'm not basing this off of past. I'm sort of basing this off of what I see right now. And that's a guy that actually is contending this season. Granted, how much longer will it last? I don't know. But when you hear his name being said time and time again, you listen to these broadcasts and you can pick up a lot on what the announcers are saying and where to keep your attention focused because they don't say Ricky Stenhouse's name very often. So when you hear it over and over in a broadcast, you take notes and you say, you know what? Ricky Stenhouse is actually running well today. And again, he may not get top 5 finishes every week, but he can hang. He got a top 10 in Fontana, which is really good for Ricky Stenhouse. Yeah. So I know 28th at Daytona, but that was Daytona.
Yeah, and he was leading the 500, or he was close to the front when he crashed. So
Absolutely.
9 laps to go, he was the leader. So
Yep.
Yeah, I think at this tier, like I do like Ricky Stenhouse. I do like what I've seen, but realistically, I think I like what I've seen out of Chase Briscoe even a little more, honestly, especially when these road courses are coming around at Coda, coming up here in a little while. Like Chase Briscoe is a pretty decent road racer. Right now, he's top 5 in fantasy points scored so far in 2022. So I don't know, man. I think Chase Briscoe has something here. The whole Stuart Haas team has really kind of turned it around here this year too.
yeah, certainly a lot of good value guys in here. And with Stenhouse and JTG Doherty, I think that them scaling back again to one car, they only have the one charter, just keeping it with that 47 could help them a lot. And Ricky Stenhouse has been made into such a punchline over the years. Sometimes we forget the talent this guy has. He's won 2 Xfinity titles, won a few races with Roush. The most recent race that Roush won was Ricky Stenhouse winning that race. Well, other than the duels, but you get my point. So the guy's got talent, and maybe it could be a good fantasy dark horse for the rest of the season if he can keep this up, which, again, it's only been 2 races. Who knows?
Makes me feel old, man, that he won 2 Xfinity series titles. Like that feels like lifetimes ago at this point.
About 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
The number 6 down there.
You're an old
Yes,
man,
sir.
Seth. You're an old man.
We're getting there, man. We're getting there.
Although I will add, Luke, I want to add something about Bubba Wallace because he's an intriguing play for me.
Yes, sir.
You know, one of the guys where I sort of touted him coming into the season because of the fact that now he's got Kurt Busch on his side. He seems like he's coming into his own. He performed well at Daytona. He looked okay in Fontana for a while until he obviously couldn't finish. But I just feel like we're on the cusp of something good with Bubba Wallace. And I think if you're a fantasy manager and you have him, be patient with him. If you're a fantasy manager that after 2 weeks is ready to go after somebody, target Bubba Wallace after this performance, especially because I have a feeling we're on to something with him. And I mean, he may not be a league champion, but he can probably contribute to your fantasy team week over week in a positive way.
For a driver 4 or 5 on your roster, he's exactly what you want. Right now, he's top 7 in fantasy points scored here in 2022. He's been getting it done. And last week, he was on his way to a better finish. I really do believe that. He had kind of struggled all day long, and then he finally put the car together in the fashion he wanted towards the end of that race. And then, man, old Brad came in like a bull in a china shop and just ruined his day. So I like that, Rod, man. I have Bubba in our redraft league. I'm definitely hanging on to him, and he's been a really sound DFS play as well these last few weeks.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic with the 23-11 guys. I put Kurt Busch a lot lower in my tiers than he is right now. Bubba Wallace I had right about here, but it's not because of anything that they've done that's wrong. It's just with a first-year team and now a second-year team, sometimes they just get into situations. Again, sometimes it's not of their own fault. Sometimes it's just things that happen when you're just not quite there. And Bubba Wallace finishing second at Daytona. It's Daytona. He's got the talent there. I'm still waiting to see a little more to really put these guys in the upper echelon. But I guess if you can get him as a driver 4 or 5, the hell with the upper echelon. You get him as a 4 or 5, and they're probably going to get you good value there. So if you can get him that low, probably a good time to do it before they get better, because I think they will. Moving on to our 5th and final tier this week, we cut off the fat at the bottom. There are only a couple of full-time cars that we didn't discuss here. But tier number 5 has Cole Custer, Harrison Burton, the rotating 16 car, which has Daniel Hemrick in it, Michael McDowell, Ty Dillon, and Justin Haley, the other colored car. And here's where I'll make my point about Stuart Haas Racing. The second episode of last year, we spent the biggest talking point of that episode was just taking massive craps on Stuart Haas Racing for how bad they were last year. And it was a pretty terrible year last season for Stuart Haas. They have done a complete 180, and they are one of the teams on the upswing this season. All their drivers are performing. We talked about Almirola earlier. Harvick is showing consistency. And this was a big weekend for Cole Custer. He won and pretty much dominated the Xfinity race, which I know doesn't mean much. But I think that and the good run that he had at Fontana can only build his confidence. And that's something that he needs. In his rookie year, the pandemic year, he had that win in Kentucky and then not much else. Last year was just such a poor season for Stuart Haas as a whole, like I said. And that the 41 car was somewhere in the low 20s, I think, in points. He was like 27th, 28th, something just ridiculously low. And I don't remember if I made this point. I feel like I did on the opening episode of the Backroad or in my column or something, that this was a big year for Cole Custer, that he needed to make a big jump, to hold on to that ride until somebody with funding could jump into it. I think right now he's doing that. And if he can take the confidence boost of an Xfinity win and a good Cup run and the team performing well, could be a big season. And we may feel silly putting him in Tier 5 this early, basically, is my point. So SHR could be fun to watch. Seth, some points on the Tier 5 guys?
Yeah, man, this one's a tough one because I'm definitely eating a little crow on Cole Custer. I came out and said how I didn't want him. I didn't think he was worth anywhere in the top 30 drivers going in drafts this year. And he came out and in that Xfinity race, we saw time and time again going to caution late in the race, and he kept defending that inside lane, kept getting out in front. And it was a really good performance from him. After I saw that, I went and made a couple DFS lineups. I threw him in it, and he led me to victory in a couple of them. So, yeah, Cole Custer's been good. I'm honestly a little surprised, but I think maybe this shift to the next-gen car is something that's been good for him. As far as the rest of this tier goes, Harrison Burton, had a good run at Daytona. Brad kind of got in the way of that. But the 16 car, man, I think we were really dead on in our opening episode this season. I like the 16 car a lot coming into this season. Right now, they're top 12 in fantasy points and just 2 solid finishes for Daniel Hemrick. On those road courses, too, you're going to get dinger. So I think, I have Corey LaJoie in our redraft league. He was the last pick of that draft. We only draft 30 drivers in that league. I was thinking about dropping him going into Daytona for Daniel Hemrick, and I didn't, and I'm really regretting it because Daniel Hemrick has been fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, again, what did he finish 9th last week? That's for Daniel Hemrick. Like, who? You're scratching your head. But to my point, there were 4 drivers with 40 numbered cars in the top 11 last week. We don't do that very often, right? And obviously, Cole Custer being the last of which, but Stenhouse was in there, Busch was in there, Eric Jones was in there. So, some of these other guys are making some noise. And Cole Custer, yes, he was one of the punchlines in this channel that I've got. One guy loved to bet him some Cole Custer every week to win. That was his bet. But that may not be a joke very much longer this season. He may break through and actually put one in the win column this year. And we're done laughing about Cole Custer. He could actually be a contender as far as winning a race or 2 or 3 this season.
Well, like I said, he's on a team that's on an upswing. And 2 more quick points I'll make here. If Reddick isn't the most snake bit guy this season, it's Harrison Burton. He's had some decent runs and has just got wrecked in both of them. I think that he is a guy who really could benefit from the Team Penske dominance that we've seen so far, at least in terms of performance-wise. And he's a guy that can really keep moving up as he continues on with his rookie season. And that 16 car, goodbye low. The 16 car, I believe, has Noah Gragson in it this coming weekend. I believe it's his home track in Vegas too. That could be interesting. And with LaJoie, real quick, he was the only guy receiving some points that didn't make our tiers. I said earlier in either the column or the episode, forgive me for not remembering which, that I still have zero trust in Spire Motorsports to be anything but a money-making team until I see something. And they just have not shown anything at all this season. So still optimistic. LaJoie's still a talented guy. I am not touching them unless it's an absolute bottom dollar, bottom of the barrel pickup to maybe get me a couple extra points at the bottom of the lineup.
Elliot, this week with Noah Gragson coming in that 16 car, DFS, redraft, dynasty, whatever you're playing here, would you rather play Noah Gragson over Corey LaJoie in that number 7 car?
Oh, that's not even a question. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to take the pulse of the room.
Runs deep.
Love it.
Yeah, I would take the 16 and the 31 as well. Justin Haley, he's had poor finishes, but just got caught up in incidents. And he had an incident in the Clash, incident in these races as well. That car's going to have some good finishes this year. I don't think he's going to be anywhere close to a number 1 or even a number 2, maybe not even a number 3 driver in fantasy lineups this year. Again, good low value pickups that we could see. But there are our tire tiers for the week. And now we'll look ahead to the upcoming couple of races with the Horizon forecast.
Hey, Michael, it was only 20% chance of rain. I think we got all 20.
I absolutely love that drop. That is hilarious.
It is a great one, and kind of funny that we see the rain there. Rain is normally not what we want on NASCAR weekends. I don't think we're going to have to deal with any of these next two places we're coming to as the West Coast swing continues. Las Vegas Motor Speedway this coming week, and then Phoenix in 2 weeks coming up. Vegas, pretty similar track to Auto Club, a little smaller. The first true, cookie cutter mile and a half that we're going to see this season. The type of track where we saw a lot of the Snooze Fest type of races with the old car. Do we think the racing is going to be similar to what we saw at Auto Club, or is it going to be more similar to those kind of clunkers that we saw in years past at races like these?
I'd like to hope that it's like the last couple that we've seen, because again, the racing has been just great to watch. And I think what we saw at Fontana, I think that's what we're going to see more of when we go to Las Vegas, only because we saw a different style of racing that we've seen in a while in Daytona. So I have a feeling that this trend's going to continue. The racing's just going to continue to get better. Now that we're shrinking the track down again, we go from big to not quite so big to not big at all at this point. So we condense the mileage, and not the mileage. Well, yeah, the mileage too, but we condense everything. More cars in a closer proximity. I have a feeling we're going to see some good racing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a hybrid of the two. I don't think it's going to be quite what Auto Club was. I think Auto Club is like deceivingly a pretty kind of fun track. I mean, it's always been a little bit cookie cutter, but I think it's better than a lot of these mile and a halves that we get. And I'll be honest, I kind of have always had a soft spot for Las Vegas. I don't know if it's like the fall race is always really interesting there in the playoffs, but I think we could get something fun here, man. I mean, Kurt Busch, he's always fun to watch here. I like him. I like Daniel Suarez this week. There's a lot of people I like, but I think it's going to be a hybrid of the two, honestly.
So we got Vegas, and then we go to Phoenix, which is always one of the most interesting regular season races, one of the most interesting early season races, because it's where we're coming back to for the championship at the end of the year. Always super duper important to see what you can do here and translate that to the end of the year. You guys have any specific thoughts on Phoenix?
I just know that you're right. They're going to try to get this. This is, or Phoenix will be the maiden voyage for them to figure out how to get to the end of the year. They're going to take what they learned, obviously, on that track and really just take it to heart to try to build the cars for the end of the season. Hopefully, if they get there. I mean, the championship contending teams every year. Austin Cindric is already ready to get his car ready for Phoenix. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think from a fantasy point of view for these next two races, especially Phoenix, I'm riding with a couple guys. I'm riding with Kyle Larson. I don't care if it's going to be chalk in DFS. I'm riding with him. I'm riding with those Penske guys too here at Phoenix. I think Joey Logano is a real threat to win this thing. And like honestly, Kevin Harvick's like getting up there, Rod. I know you were high on him earlier in the season. And he has 9 total wins here at Phoenix as well. So I think he's a threat to win it no matter what kind of car they're racing there. I am fading Denny Hamlin a little bit, though. He hasn't been great at Las Vegas. We have seen him get too many W's at Phoenix over the years as well. So a couple of those top guys I like. A couple of them I'm fading, though. But I'm excited to see how it plays out either way.
All right, I pretty much echo your guys' thoughts in terms of race analysis for these. I'm going to make some picks for who's getting the W there. You guys can join me if you want. I think at Vegas, I said earlier about Kurt Busch in 23-11. Kurt Busch gets you 1 win a year. Yeah. I think that comes early. I think he gets the win at his home track in Vegas. And for Phoenix, the boring pick, I think Kyle Larson wins it again. They show their dominance and become the first multiple win driver this season. You guys got anybody, or am I left out on an island here?
Rod, please, my friend.
You want me to jump in on this one? This one's going to be the not favorite one because he's been making a lot of people mad. I'm going to go with Keselowski. The guy's had 3 wins on this track over the last few seasons, the last 5 races. And he knows how to run this track. And I think he very much has a shot. In his 17 starts, he's got 3 wins here, 8 top 5s, 12 top 10s. He has led a total of 313 laps. So he can get around this track and he's done it and he's won. He's not popular, but he's also proven that he knows how to drive this car. Albeit into other people, but I have a feeling if he can do it and not run into other people, I think he's got a very good chance to win on this track, given the track history and the proficiency he's shown in this car so far.
I like it. I like it. Is that strictly your pick for Las Vegas there, Rod, or is that who's your Phoenix
Oh,
pick?
yeah, we're going into Kyle Larson for
Okay, that's
I mean,
yeah.
I can't. It's Elliot's right. It's the boring pick, but it's Kyle Larson for Phoenix.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's Kyle Larson for Phoenix. I got to eat the chalk there on it. Honestly, as far as Las Vegas goes, I think I'm taking Logano, man. I've been hot on him so far this season. I think he's going to get a W here early in the season. He has good history at this track. The Penske boys, this is a track I think they like to eat up. I don't think like some of these major players like Denny Hamlin and even Kyle Busch are going to come to play as much at Las Vegas as we think. So I want Team Penske, man. I want as much Team Penske as I can in all my lineups I'm setting this week.
All right, so we've picked our winners. Let's get a little more specific with the particular bets with the down home DFS. All right, guys, you two are the betting experts. Go ahead and have at it. What do you got?
All right. Well, before we jump in here, I will hand it to Rod because I know Rod's had some really good picks here over the last couple of weeks. I will say, though, I think what we talked about on our intro episode of the season, it sticks here, guys. Stack the back. If you see some of these guys qualifying towards the back, last week it was Kurt Busch, Bubba Wallace, Cole Custer, those type of guys. You want them in your lineup, man. It's going to make a hell of a difference because, you can put Kyle Busch in your lineup all you want if he's going to be I think I had him a couple lineups last week. He started third, and it just did not pay off. I think he had 18 total fantasy points. So you want to continue to stack that back. My best lineup last week, I was in the top 200 out of 10K, and it really came down to me having almost entirely guys in the 30s that started in the 30s and they made their way up through the pack. I think I played Kyle Larson and he was like the top guy I had in that lineup and he was starting 13th. So I know we want to take some of these sexy drivers up front, but I think don't be afraid to stack the back and don't fade the chalk. Kyle Larson, we thought he was going to be the chalk play last week, comes in under 30% rostered here in DraftKings. So those are my two things. Don't fade the chalk. Keep stacking the back. Rod, overall strategy points that you've had success with or not so success with this season so far?
Yeah, and it's crazy because we are this season again at a disadvantage because we don't get to watch qualifying early in the actual week. We kind of knew by Thursday last season where people were starting based on the whole formula and all that stuff, so you could kind of gauge it. But now you really have to play by the seat of your pants. And now this is where past track production also comes into play as well. So overall strategy is to make sure look, I get it. Easy picks are easy picks, but if you really want to do your own research, I mean, there's plenty of sites out there like the Racing Reference Info tells you the track performance for these guys. And you can look back to their history and see the pricing and see what kind of values you're getting. So, I mean, overall strategy, that's exactly it. And really it leads you to a guy like Ryan Blaney. I know that I gave him a lot of poo-poo on that last one, but Ryan Blaney is a fifth place machine. Like this guy, on this track can pretty much get you fifth place. He was fifth place in the fall and spring of 21. He was seventh place in the fall of 20, but he was fifth place in the fall of 19, the fall and spring of 18, where he had the pole as well. So, I mean, this guy in his 11 starts has 8 top 10s and 5 top 5s. So Ryan Blaney, probably not too heavily priced again because of he's not the sexy name. So keep an eye on what he's priced and maybe load up on a guy like him. Look for those average finishes. Those average finishes really play a lot versus value. So really dig into that to try to figure out which drivers are going to start, especially during qualifying toward the back, but have turned in solid finishes over the course of their career at that track.
Yeah, to pile on with that, Rod, I couldn't agree more with you, man. You got to be checking that average finishes. It literally is as easy as Googling average finishes, NASCAR, whatever the track name. There are a lot of resources out there for you. Take advantage of that. A couple guys I'm targeting here for Las Vegas, Austin Dillon. He has 2 top 5s here. He showed speed, a lot of speed at Auto Club. got that top 5 finish, and he's been keeping his car out of dangerous situations. And that's what I love from my DFS drivers right now. I don't want them back around Brad Keselowski right now. I want them being safe, strategical, and that's what Austin Dillon's done. So I'm targeting Austin Dillon if he's somewhere back in, the late teens, early 20s. I don't think he's going to be a huge rostership percentage this week. And I'm also willing to throw his brother back in a couple lineups as well. Ty Dillon has been super, super solid this season, and he was sub 8% rostered last week. Like, he was one of those guys. He didn't win you the week, but he did not lose you the week. So if you need one of those dart throws to kind of round out your lineup, Ty Dillon, man, I really like him this week as well.
To be honest, I'm a little surprised he was at 8% rostered. I figured it'd be even lower than that, but it could be interesting to watch Petty GMS go along. Well, we know these two guys are the experts, and we know that all of their picks are with 100% accuracy, so you know exactly what's going to win you money for these next couple of weeks here, for sure. All right, so we'll round out the show. We don't have a cool video drop for this just yet, but as you know, In Between Media is not just about the raw stats and the fantasy. We're also about life, and we talk a little bit about life on the show with our Backroad Stories segment. I see our topic for this week, talking about our favorite and best food in any racetrack or tailgate. I'll lead this one off. To be honest, I'm a pretty simple guy when it comes to food. Give me a good cheeseburger, and I'm pretty happy. One thing I am excited to try, though, for the first time, I'm still hoping to make it down to the Martinsville race weekend this spring, here coming up in about a month or so. Everyone talks about the Martinsville hot dog. Off the top of my head, I don't know what's on it. I don't remember where to get it, but I know everyone loves it, and I'm hoping to try one here in about a month's time.
Well, I'm close enough to Sonoma where it's just wine and cheese. I mean, really. I'm sorry. They don't tailgate all that great around. It's wine and it's cheese. But for me, look, if I'm throwing a tailgate, give me good old fashioned ribs. I love me some baby back ribs, especially if they're smoked and been smoked all day, or at the very least tossed on the grill and done up right. Lots of barbecue sauce. Give me some ribs and some baked beans to go along with it.
Okay. I kind of break this down into two categories, because like there's tailgate food, which like I want it to be easy to make. I want it to be plentiful for everyone and just be able to sit out a little bit, no matter the temperature, whether it's hot, cold, whatever it is. If I'm going tailgate food, like I don't think you can go wrong with some sandwich sliders, guys. Last week I had a column. I ranked my top underrated appetizers. Sliders, man, whether you want to do burger sliders, some barbecue sliders like Rod maybe suggested, or just your old-fashioned like meat cheese sliders, man. I don't think you can go wrong with it. As far as in the race, man, or in an event, like likely I have been drinking. If I'm at a sporting event, there's a better percentage than not that I have been drinking that day, if I'm not driving home, of course. And if that's the case, I want to soak up my Busch Lights with some salty food, man. Give me some tender baskets, give me some fries, popcorn, whatever that is, man. But I mean, between the races I've been to and the football games, like those chicken tender baskets, man, they might be a little expensive, but they're worth the price in my book.
Oh man, you guys are making me hungry. But before we wrap up here for this week on the Backroad, Seth, you want to talk about some stuff that's coming down the pipe on In Between Media? Anything to plug here?
Yeah, In Between Media, guys, we are absolutely rolling with our off-season schedule right now. We got 2 columns coming out every single week. We got this show alternating weeks with the 19th hole, which if you guys are into golf, if you're into spirit tasting, spirit mixing, we got our guy Connor and Bo over there. They're mixing it up. They're giving you their plays every single week for DFS PGA. They absolutely smoked it this last week. They were very, very good. Had a lot of guys in that winning circle. So make sure you're checking them out. In Between Fantasy Football Podcast. Next week, we got Pat Fitzmaurice from the Fantasy Pros podcast coming on with us. That's super exciting. But everything we have, guys, you know where to find us, inbetweenmedia.com. We have columns, we have YouTube series, we have our podcasts. We also have our community, the In Between family, and that has been an absolute blast to get to know our audience better, get to chat. We're giving you our weekly lineups. I throw my DFS lineups in there every week. I know Rod is throwing in there some lineups that he's doing some advice. So if you want to get the best one-on-one advice, whether it's NASCAR, fantasy football, fantasy golf, UFC, whatever it is, join the In Between family, guys. I highly recommend it. Just go to our site. You can see it all, what we have to offer there. Rod, what do you have coming on down the pipeline as well? Because I know you guys are busy over there, also doing some NASCAR betting podcast over there as well.
Yeah, actually. So outside, I moonlight. I'm sorry, Seth.
You're good, brother.
I commit podultry, as Matthew Berry would call it. Yeah, I mean, I host a NASCAR gambling podcast. You can find it on anywhere where you find your favorite podcast. It's called the NASCAR Gambling Podcast. Me and my buddy Cody, we chop it up. We talk about your best bets for NASCAR week in and week out, and we've been doing all right so far. Actually, we've been making some people a little bit of money and having
coin,
some fun,
baby.
A little bit of coin, right? I mean,
dollar bills, yo.
You ain't gonna eat sirloin every night because of it, but at the very least, you can have sliders. So, yeah, check it out over there. And just having a blast doing that as well. And now getting into some USFL, that's coming down the pipe for me too. So, yeah, but my heart's here with you guys.
Down the back row, baby. Down the back row. Let's go.
It's always appreciated, Rod. USFL will be interesting to watch as well. But again, thank you everyone for rolling on down the back road with us. We'll see you again in 2 weeks' time for episode 3 this season. Thanks again for watching. Have a good night, all.